Continuing this series' expanded look at what the Age of the Ring mod provides in its factions, both those original to AOTR and expanded ones from vanilla ROTWK, it's worth noting up front again that these videos are not guides, merely faction highlights so you can see at a glance what some of the more interesting changes are, or all new features are. Needless to say, this is not an exhaustive demonstration or compendium of changes. Something important to note up front, though. In this series, sometimes you'll see oddities like abilities and powers instantly refreshing, or resource structures that produce insanely high resources. This is just a product of the mod's testing mode, which lets you change these values in-game for testing purposes, or demonstration purposes as in this series. So these changes should not be seen as accurately representing the mod and how it actually plays. In the previous episode of this series, we finished our look at the last of the elven factions, Lothlorien, which was the third part of the incredible overhaul of Vanilla's singular faction of the elves. Now we get to Isengard. AOTR's Isengard is the faction which bears the closest resemblance to its vanilla counterpart by far, even down to the structure art. Many heroes, units, spellbook powers, and so on are virtually the same. So let's take a moment to show this art appreciation as always in this series. The fortress I don't believe has undergone any changes, but while several other structures remain the same, some have gotten better textures. The overhauled Wildmen steading suggests some more cultured and intelligent people than in vanilla. A brand new structure, the Dunlending Longhouse, recruits an all-new set of units, the Dunlendings, who rule over the Wildmen. As for banner carriers, vanilla has only one for all of its units. As with many factions in both games, banner carriers proper are hit and miss depending on the unit, replaced oftentimes by a unique unit found nowhere else. AOTR now has two different white hand banners. Wildmen now get an elect Herser to lead them, with two variations. And the new Dunlending units have a new Crow banner. And their new hero unit gets a unique banner of his own. Getting to the main stuff though, discounts are a big part of Vanilla's Isengard, but there are also more discounts to be had in AOTR. This includes lumber mill discounts for buildings, armory discounts for upgrades, which stack with the Burning Forges upgrade, furnace discounts for Uruks, and an all-new fortress upgrade which has a whole set of additional discounts that permanently stack with the others. While only one of these Fortress Focus upgrade discounts may be active at a time, this is considerable. Compare this to Vanilla, where there is only the Burning Forges and the Excavations upgrade discounts. In AOTR, the mechanics of excavations have been replaced with an armor buff for surrounding buildings, making AOTR Isengard bases tougher than most other factions in the mod, and certainly tougher than in vanilla. Stronger economy and tougher base than in vanilla, can't go wrong. There are now some special additions to certain structures too. Furnaces now have a blast ability to protect themselves, highly effective against spam units. Insofar as units go, there are some important additions and changes to pre-existing units. All kinds of Wildmen of both Vanilla and Age of the Ring are practically the same in terms of abilities and function within a match, such as spamming the enemy and stealing resources to boost your eco while slowing down the enemies. The key difference is that in Vanilla there are no spearmen, which makes an early game Wildman strategy very vulnerable to cavalry, forcing you to get your Uruk pikemen, which can potentially slow things down a good deal. In Age of the Ring, this has been corrected, keeping your Wildman strategy intact without the hassle. Basic Wildmen have the same abilities as in Vanilla, as do the Axe Throwers, and all but the Axe Throwers get the ability to pillage. In Vanilla, the Warg Pit has the Warg Packs and Warg Riders, both of which are basic Tier 1 cavalry. The Warg Packs, though, are rather slow and don't really do a whole lot, doing better as supplemental cavalry. But for all intents and purposes, the Warg Riders are your only real source of cavalry in Vanilla, as the Warg Packs are quickly phased out. Warg Riders are quite good, having a howl ability to buff their damage, and they get heavy armor. In AOTR, the Warg Packs have been removed, so you're only left with the Warg Riders, a faster way to keep up with other factions' cavalry right off the get-go. There is now a more advanced cavalry unit, though, to be covered later. Notice they cannot receive the heavy armor upgrade, though, as in Vanilla, at least not the one from the armory. Instead, it is provided through the Warg Rider hero Sharku for free. This may sound a little disappointing on the surface, but given AOTR's change for armories and most other upgrade structures to upgrade progressively via resource gain instead of instantly at your leisure as in Vanilla, depending on how well you harass your enemy's upgrade structures, this new way of upgrading your Warg Rider's heavy armor can give you a big edge. What's more is AOTR's Warg Riders now get further buffs via the Fortress upgrade. A great bonus from the Warg Pit now, at level 3 you get extra Wargs in your Warg Sentries, a great way to incentivize these defenses. The siege units for both games remain the same. However, in AOTR, you do get to permanently upgrade all siege equipment with a massive damage buff, a bit of speed, and a discount. The Uruk-hai have always been a tough unit to counter in Vanilla, being a more advanced Tier 1 unit, especially with the Swordsmen getting a permanent buff to their damage at level 2. In AOTR, the Uruks have been bumped up from Vanilla's Tier 1 status to a much more powerful Tier 2 unit with appropriately much better stats, making them even more formidable than in Vanilla. Notice the pikemen's spear wall formation decreases their speed, not holds them in place as in vanilla. This changes the way pikes are used considerably, needless to say. This is all a better way to emphasize their unnatural, almost superhuman nature than in vanilla, made even more terrifying by several fortress focus upgrades permanently buffing any of these units on the battlefield. Because these are tier 2 units, this changes the pace of any Isengard game compared to vanilla, being gated behind the new Uruk Scouts before being unlocked at a level 2 Uruk Pit. While you could rely solely on the Wildmen during this early stage of the game, the new Uruk Scouts unit should not be cast aside. Being able to switch between bow and sword as an early game unit is very rare, making them a formidable adversary for this reason alone, as they can quickly take out vulnerable builders with their arrows, then switch over to swords and raid the farms. They move somewhat fast too, making this that much smoother. They have much better stats as archers than swordsmen though, so it's best to use their swords to take out structures instead of taking on enemy troops in melee mode, if that can be helped. You can rush these units en masse pretty well on their own, but obviously they would be at risk of cavalry if your enemy focuses on that, so typically you will want to mix these units with Wildmen spears, a very different pace than vanilla indeed, in which many players like to use Uruk swords early game, accompanied by Uruk spearmen, saving a lot of time by not building 2 structures to get the Wildmen, which you'd have to do in AOTR. Uruk Scouts have access to a special fortress upgrade for them in the crossbowmen as well, and being granted a considerable permanent buff to their damage at level 3 and able to slow down fleeing units by a whopping 33%, like heroes especially, which can be done over and over again for each scout by the way. This makes them something not to be underestimated in the early game in particular, but also keeps them relevant even into the late game, encouraging you to mix them with more advanced archers. So for an early game unit, they're pretty powerful. There are other new Uruk units as well, such as the Shieldbearers, which buff surrounding Uruks to make them even tankier, which of course stacks with their focus upgrades for themselves and other units, as well as buffs, leaderships, and other spells. While these units are few in number, being only support units, they are easy to mix in with your troops and keep up to pace with them, and you only need a small handful. Again, a great way of bringing the movies to life that much more, and your troops can be even further supplemented by the overhaul of the fearsome Berserkers. In vanilla, the Berserkers are a unique support unit doing great splash, hero, and structure damage, capable of turning the tide in short order, but have no special abilities. In AOTR, Berserkers now have several functions to make them even more fearsome support units than their vanilla counterparts, which honestly is saying something, and these Berserkers can buff one another, not just your other Uruks. So Berserkers get a massive armor buff for themselves and provide a good damage and speed buff to each other and surrounding Uruks. Vanilla's heroic unit, the Deathbringers, have always been something to be greatly feared as well, not being able to be trampled and doing massive amounts of damage, and all while knocking back enemy units no less. Note they only have 3 units per battalion. AOTR though has 8. For being only 3 units per battalion, they perform incredibly well against hordes of even advanced units. Recall Vanilla's Noldor warriors have a powerful ability boosting their damage and armor for 30 seconds. Let's see how they do. The result is the same with a 3-on-3 by the way, the max each can have on the battlefield. And this result is actually worse without using the Death Wish ability. You'd think avoiding decreasing their armor would yield better results, but not so much. So their massive damage buff and attack speed makes a big difference here. Now an undefended fortress will melt like butter to these guys, even with just 2 of them. So assuming your enemy gets smart for the next match and upgrades it with defenses, still pretty impressive overall. Elven Fortress defenses are some of the best to counter overwhelming melee fours, and they took a beating from the Floodgate defenses. In AOTR, they're to be feared even more, being renamed Manslayers with incredible new model art to make them look more in line with the Uruks. The Manslayers can do massive amounts of damage on their own to enemy bases and cut down heroes extra fast. They can now heal when doing damage, and to preserve them even better is their speed buff, which stacks with other speed buffs, including the Berserkers. So when you find them outmatched, now they can get away at lightning speeds. It's also incredible that the damage of these guys can be buffed by the Berserkers. And as is to be expected, you gotta defend your fortress against just 2 of these guys. But a well-defended fortress? Obviously, AOTR's iteration is a bit of a joke. I doubt that even if they could have a 3rd battalion, it would make any difference. But, more on this later. But just like in vanilla, these guys do extremely well against hordes, especially given their knockback combined with how they gain health per hit. But unlike their vanilla counterpart, the Manslayers can knock back even heroic units. So otherwise very tough units like Rohan's Helmingas can barely scratch them. So you gotta have a heroic unit that has knockback resistance, like Rivendell's Veterans of the Last Alliance. Recall from the Rivendell episode that their Siege of Eregion ability provides this along with an armor buff. Unlike Vanilla's Noldor Warriors, these are limited to 2 on the battlefield. Even with their knockback resistance though, this is a world of difference compared to the vanilla fight. And when their ability wears off, naturally they're even more vulnerable to these guys. One of the most fun new units, though, is the Uruk Sapper. A little tough to acquire, straight out of the Two Towers action game from the early 2000s, these guys can quickly demolish an enemy base or army en masse, effectively replacing the large mine that virtually never gets used. And of course, speed buffs stack on them for amazing surprise attacks out of left field. But easily the biggest and most important expansion of this faction is the Dunlendings, which are interpreted as a more cultured enemy people of the Rohirrim who rule over the Wildmen. They come complete with their own story, special structure, their own new hero and heroic unit, and even their own fortress map. Their archers are far better than the Uruk crossbowmen, and their cavalry greatly excel over the Warg riders. The Dunlending Axemen have a special level 4 ability that makes them and Wildmen resistant to trampling, making them a bane to enemy cavalry. The Axemen also do high damage to structures, making them great for raids. The Dunlending Longbowmen get a great firing range and damage buff, making them perfect for taking out enemies from afar fast, especially once you stack even more buffs on them. And the Dunlending Outriders are some of the fastest cavalry in the game, having a speed buff that stacks with other speed buffs. 3 of these units are made more effective with one of the Fortress Focus upgrades. The all-new semi-heroic unit, the Dunlending Huskarls, are every bit as dangerous as one would expect, capable of cutting right through enemy armor, with bonus damage to heroes and multiplying their own damage as they incur more hits upon the enemy. The thing to know about these guys, however, is how best to use them. Limited to 2 on the battlefield, on their own they can just keep up with multiple heroes, or in a 1-for-1 with heroic units. This is all the while boosting XP gain for Dunlendings and Wildmen alike, helping keep Wildmen relevant well into the late game to be mixed with the Dunlendings until you can gain a stronger economy to afford only late game troops. This relevancy is made even more acute by the focus upgrade for the Wildmen. This is one of AOTR's many strengths for many of its factions, keeping early game units relevant through all stages of a match so they are not so easily overshadowed by upper tier units as seems to occur so often in vanilla. This opens up so much more creativity and strategic options in Age of the Ring. You can see their semi-heroic unit status better when up against a full heroic unit. They can make them hurt though, and it's largely thanks to their ability to ignore unit armor. So used just on their own, it's easy to guess who will barely be the victor, but pretty tough guys. Obviously they work vastly different from the Manslayers, who are full heroic units, not semi-heroic. But semi-heroic units are supposed to be weaker, obviously, and these guys are supposed to be used in conjunction with Wildmen or other Dunlendings as per their leadership, but also with Isengard's new hero, Wulfgar. We'll cover Wulfgar more later in this video, but like with other heroes, he can buff semi-heroic units not just with his leadership, but also his powerful level 10 ability. Use this hero just for his buffs and everything shown about the Huskarls changes dramatically. These impressive results get even better when stacking other buffs on them. Tougher units for less cost can't go wrong. While these new units are quite powerful, they are on the sidelines in a sense in terms of how the faction plays, as they are locked behind the aforementioned new hero and their own structure, so they're more of a mid to late game series of units. So let's move on to the various new and overhauled spellbook powers, abilities, and heroes which fill out the expanded faction in some incredible ways. Playstyle is mostly the same too, but there are some seemingly small but important deviations which change it, especially the early game, but really all throughout. A great example is the economy. As it is in vanilla, Isengard is still the #1 economic powerhouse it has always been since BFME 1, so it's appropriate to start there. The difference is that in AOTR it's actually even more formidable. Starting with the Fuel the Fire's power, while it looks like Vanilla's version actually gets you more per tree, upon testing it this is not true. Turning off resource production at the default fortress to show as objectively as possible what just one tree will get you with that power active, you can clearly see the difference. Notice that even with it active immediately, any workers already targeting a tree have to bring the lumber back first before the power actually kicks into effect. This is not the case in AOTR. That alone can make a world of difference to your resources if you have lots of lumber mills already on the field by the time you make the power active. Now that the tree is depleted, you'll see that with the last of its lumber that the sum resources of one tree is 600 with Fuel the Fire's active. So let's see how it is in AOTR. By the way, a few details worth noting. The timing, such as the distance the workers have to travel, does not matter here, and while the default number of workers per mill is the same for each game, that doesn't matter either. What matters is the total number of resources gained before the tree is gone. Appropriately, AOTR has 12 resources per worker with the power active. It also bears noting that Vanilla's is an active power with a time limit you always have to manually refresh, with a long cooldown to boot, whereas AOTR's is the traditional passive power it has always been before Vanilla changed it. It's also worth noting that AOTR's lumber mill increased a level, which of course grants you even more resources per worker. So in AOTR, you're able to level up a lumber mill with just one tree. Can't do that in Vanilla, even with the Fuel the Fire's power active. And AOTR wins out by about 400 resources more per tree. And where Vanilla's industry power grants a hefty amount of resources on only furnaces for 2 minutes, AOTR's Fires of Industry power grants an added 50% gain for 5 minutes, literally doubling your resource gain from the default value per tick for more than twice as long as Vanilla, and it can be cast on armories as well. This is incredible considering that armories, unlike in Vanilla, are resource structures in addition to upgrade structures, granting AOTR players that much more opportunity to gain resources. This power also lets you level up that armory way faster for faster upgrades than most other factions in the game. And because they have the same resource output as furnaces, you can choose to replace the furnaces with armories later in the game, a wise choice given armories have higher armor than furnaces. This swap is especially useful for additional upgrade discounts. It bears noting that both games have a cap of 1,300 resources total for their devastation powers. In Vanilla, you can summon Wildmen to your cause, which is a good way to gain resources in a pinch, but in AOTR you get Orcs instead, which gain you resources as well, but also a minor hero, Grishnach, who can do pretty serious damage to a hero, so it's been transformed into something of a hero killer power, also a great touch reflecting the books and films. Because Grishnach is a minor hero and a mid-game power, watch how he stacks up to the mid-game hero of Erkenbrand. Pretty impressive for his ability, especially given he's a temporary free hero. If the rest of his orc band had been used, Erkenbrand would be gone. Now, as far as the units themselves, in Vanilla you get 4 battalions of Wildmen and an additional battalion of Axe Throwers, none of which are upgraded. But in AOTR, you get 2 battalions of normal orcs, 1 pikeman, and upgraded archers, which make them a bit better than the Wildmen of Vanilla. Resource gain is comparable, by the way. Speaking of spellbooks, one of the new powers to come out of AOTR is called Build Me an Army, which replaces the Watcher in the Water, a power which has nothing at all to do with Isengard. This new power's War Camp summons one of 3 types of Uruk every so often, all upgrade and unit costs completely free. This is a great way to reflect the industrial might of the faction, and has everything to do with the story of Isengard, unlike the Watcher power from Vanilla. Now we come to the dragon summon powers of Vanilla's Isengard. Like the Watcher in the Water, these have never had anything to do with the story of the faction, and so have appropriately been replaced in AOTR with Saruman's lightning power, coupled with the avalanche power. Some mechanical aspects which make this change all for the better as well. No vulnerabilities to units, obviously, but also targeting. Also worth considering, you don't have to wait around all day on the dragon crawling around, which may or may not target what you want. And there's nothing more anticlimactic than a 25 PP power being killed before it does much of anything. And finally we come to the heroes. In Vanilla, Isengard is known for few heroes. In AOTR, this roster has been expanded by a couple more. Ugluk, a decent mid-game support hero, and Wulfgar, a rather powerful mid to late game hero. More on these in a bit. There are a few subtle differences for Wormtongue between both games. In vanilla, he can actually debuff enemy monsters, which may be the only example of this in that game. There is one major difference worth noting. In vanilla, he can temporarily gain control of enemy heroes. There's almost nothing more deflating than seeing this happen to you. And Wormtongue remains stealthed. You could then command the controlled hero to die amongst other enemy ranks. In Age of the Ring, the biggest differences are he cannot debuff monsters, and he cannot take control of enemy heroes. However, he can reset their abilities' cooldowns, which can make a devastating impact. Sharku has several important differences. A pretty standard cavalry hero in vanilla, providing leadership for the Warg Riders. In AOTR, he does a good deal more, granting a permanent health boost to them coupled with heavy armor upgrades. He's also now able to summon a Great Warg with pretty decent damage, making it that much easier for him to flee from danger, soften up enemies before rushing in, and distracting enemies from behind. What's more, his leadership can be stacked with the focus upgrade for Warg Riders. Watch as the Wargs themselves get new armor with their permanent health buff. Along with Sharku's leadership and their own classic Howl buff, these are some of the toughest and fastest early game cavalry in the mod, made even better by their own focus upgrade to keep them relevant into the late game. Sharku on his own is more formidable now with his Warg wave attack coupled with the Warg matriarch, not to be underestimated. While vanilla has few heroes, it makes up for this with some fairly potent abilities. Classic monks, them being Lurtz's cripple shot to pin an enemy hero in place for a while, making it easy prey. Lurtz can also grant surrounding units a pillage passive ability for gaining even more resources, and can do high melee damage, making him one of the best hero killers in the game. In AOTR, Lurtz remains mostly the same, but has been bumped from a mid-game hero to a late-game one. In addition to better stats, his cripple shot can put fear in surrounding enemies, making it that much easier to take out the targeted hero, and his pillage ability has been replaced with a permanent armor boost, with a great set of Uruk armor on him no less. Ugluk is remarkable for the faction in one way especially, in that he is the only source of healing for your heroes and units, a power completely absent in vanilla ROTWK's Isengard. He also grants a speed buff, which of course stacks with the classic Palantir and Berserker speed buffs, making Manslayers move at lightning speed with their speed buff, as well as a considerable damage buff and powerful unit summon, with another minor hero. Ugluk can summon a minor hero, Mauher, a character out of the books, accompanied by unique Uruk Scout units not available elsewhere in the faction bearing two-handed melee weapons. With Ugluk's buff, this can be a great backup, or for a quick raid, or to take out a pesky hero. Ugluk's damage buff, of course, can be stacked with Lurtz's leadership on the Berserkers along with the Berserkers' own speed and damage buffs, for some incredibly potent damage and speed with the Palantir power. See my video for more detailed information. And lastly, of course, Wulfgar is essential for any Dunlending but also Wildmen strategy in AOTR, providing the expected large leadership from the chieftain. But he packs a unique ability with his double Crow summon, and his powerful debuff can be stacked with the classic Freezing Rain and Krebine debuffs to melt enemy units fast. Wulfgar's crows are unlike anything else in the other factions. Flying quite fast, they are extremely good at taking out heroes and monsters alike. Much like Wormtongue, there are really only subtle differences with Saruman between both games. One of the somewhat bigger differences, though, is that in vanilla, he can permanently take control of enemy units. In Age of the Ring, Saruman only temporarily gains control of enemies. However, this is a relatively minor loss compared to the new features given to him. One of the only differences for Saruman is an all-new mechanic not found in vanilla at all, magic protection, and AOTR Saruman offers a ton of it to nearby troops. For more details, see this video in my attribute modifier series. Some of the only other sources of this protection in the mod are Gandalf the White for Gondor and the White Stag Power for the Woodland Realm, the latter of which is covered earlier in this series. There is also a hidden feature not found even in ability descriptions. He allows walls to be built in his radius, so you're no longer restricted to building walls only around your fortress. This can be an incredible way to hem in your enemy in their own territory, or just be really annoying and build walls everywhere. But the best part of his overhaul is he can now become a new ring hero, Saruman of many colors.
Come, my servants.
One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all. And in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie.
A title he gives himself from the books after changing from Saruman the White, his ring form grants a massive spell to your army, along with incredible attacking range which actually crushes your enemies with each strike. He can summon subterranean fire, give more experience to units faster, summon a cloud of lightning, increase resource production, and more. Like with all spells, his cannot be nullified, so even the Witch King cannot come along and take those buffs away, like with leaderships. This is one of the only opportunities in the game to use a spell like this, which is a passive ability rather than an active one, so does not have a cooldown. See my video on active modifiers for more details on these differences. He is also the only source in the faction to buff out your manslayers. Ordinarily, you can't buff armor or damage of heroic units. Recall how in vanilla the Deathbringers could do only heavy damage to a fully armed fortress but not destroy it, and how AOTR's manslayers could barely touch one on their own? Notice, by the way, that here I'm keeping the manslayers in guard stance, which buffs their armor a bit more. While it decreases their damage, I know that they're already doing enough heavy damage to make a massive difference. This little bit of extra armor may not seem like much, but in the other stances they would die. Notice the incredible default attack range and how the enemies are actually crushed. And let's just show off all of his powers at once against a massive horde. As you can see, the differences Age of the Ring makes for Isengard, while few, makes all the difference indeed when it comes to economy especially, but also in terms of opening up a much wider canvas for creativity and strategic options with its new set of Dunlending units and more. A faction greatly enhanced overall in AOTR. This about wraps up this video. The next episode will cover the Goblins faction, and just what happened to Vanilla's Angmar anyways. Stay tuned to find out. In the meantime, if you haven't already, why not download this amazing mod? It's fast, free, and easy. Download link is in the description, and I have a great installation guide on my channel here.